and genetic counseling and early detection of disability and timely intervention to arrest disabling condition, and of course medical treatment and rehabilitation.
Thank you, Mr. Ronel Suarez, and I am Hannah Chris Magno, and I am the one who will continue to this topic. Now we're down to the chapter 4, the auxiliary social services. So what does it mean? This means that the state shall ensure that marginalized persons are provided with the necessary auxiliary services that will restore their social functioning and participation in community affairs. Toward this end, the Department of Social Development shall develop and implement programs. Programs shall be as follows. First, assistance in the acquisition of prosthetic devices and medical intervention of special services. Next is the provision of specialized training activities designed to improve functional limitations of disabled persons related to communication skills. Next is the development among disabled persons of a positive self image through the provisions of counseling, orientations, and mobility and strengthening daily living capability. Fourth is the provisions of family care services geared towards developing the capability of families to respond to the needs of the disabled members of the family. And next is the provisions of substitute family care services and the facilities therefore for abandoned, neglected, abused, and untouched disabled persons who need custodial care. Next is the provisions of aftercare and follow-up services for the continued rehabilitations in a community-based settings of disabled persons who were released from residual care or rehabilitation centers. And last is the provisions of daycare services for disabled children or preschool age. And next, we're down to the chapter 5, the telecommunications. Under the telecommunications, we have three sections. The section 22, 23, and 24. The section 22 is the broadcast media. So what does this mean? This means that televisions shall be encouraged to provide a sign language inset or subtitles in at least one newscast program a day and special program covering events of national significance. For example, if we can see in news TV, there is a sign language in the side part, and this is for the disabled persons, particularly who cannot hear. Next is the section 22, telephone services. This means that the all telephone companies shall be encouraged to install special telephone devices or units for the hearing impaired and ensure that they are commercially available to enable them to communicate through the telephone systems. And last to the under of telecommunication is the section 24, the free postal charges for the disabled. This means that postal charges shall be free on the following: the articles and literatures like books and periodicals, orthopedic and other devices, and technically aids for the use of the disabled sent by mail with the Philippines and abroad, and also aids and orthopedic devices for the disabled sent by abroad by mail or repair, provided that the aforesaid items are for personal purposes only, provided further that the disabled person is marginalized disabled as certified by the Social Welfare and Development Office of the local government unit concerned or the Department of Social Welfare and Development. This means that sending mail without money being paid for the disabled persons. Next is the chapter 6, the accessibility. We have a four sections here, section 25, 26, 27, and 28. So the 25 is the barrier-free environment. So this means that enable disabled persons to have access in public and private buildings and establishments and other places mentioned in Batas Pambansa Bilang 344, other known as the Accessibility Law. So the national and local governments shall allocate funds for the provisions of architectural facilities or structural features for disabled persons in government buildings and facilities. Next is Section 26, the mobility. So this means that disabled person shall allowed to drive motor vehicles subject to the rules and regulations issued by the Land Transportation Office pertinent to the nature of their disability and the appropriate adaptations or modifications made on such vehicles. Next is the Section 27, access to the public transport facilities. So this means that the Department of Social Welfare and Development shall develop a program to assist marginalized disabled persons gain access in the use of public transport facilities, such as assistance may be in the forms of subsidized transportation fare. And also the said department shall also allocate such funds as may be necessary for the effective implementations to the public transport program for the disabled persons. And the last of this chapter 6 is the implementing rules and regulations. This means that the Department of Transport and Communication shall formulate the rules and regulations necessary to implement the provisions of this chapter. And my last topic is the chapter 7, political and civil rights. So we have three sections, the section 29, 30, and 31. Section 29 is the systems of voting. This means that the disabled person shall be allowed to be assisted by a person of his choice in voting. The person prepared the ballot, and the person assisting shall bound himself in a formal document under oath to fill out the ballot strictly in accordance with instructions for the voter and not to reveal the contents of the ballot prepared by him. Violations of this provision shall constitute an elections offense. 30. The right to assemble. This means that the state shall recognize the right of disabled persons to participate in processions, rallies, parades, demonstrations, public meetings, and assemblage or other forms of mass or any concerns action held in public. Next is the section 31, the right to organize. This means the right of disabled persons to form organizations or associations that promote their welfare and advance or safeguard their interests. National government shall assist disabled persons in establishing self-help organizations by providing technical and financial assistance. And also concerned government agencies and offices shall establish close linkages with organizations of the disabled persons. And national line agencies and local government shall assist disabled in setting up specific projects and also encouraged to participate in the planning, organizations, and managements of government programs and projects for disabled persons to ensure active participations in social and economic development of the country. And the last thing is the organizations of disabled persons shall participate in the identifications and preparations of programs that shall serve to develop employment opportunities for the disabled persons. And that's in my report. Next, Miss Cristel Ceballos.
So, thank you, Miss Magno. I'm Crystal Anceballos and I'm going to report the Section 46 or the penal clause. So, when we say penal clause or the penalty clause, it is a contract that calls for a penalty to be paid or suffered by a party under specified terms, as in the event of a breach, and that is usually unenforceable. So, any person who violates any provision of this act shall suffer the following penalties. For the first violation, a fine of not less than 50,000 pesos but not exceeding 100,000 pesos, or imprisonment of not less than 6 months but not more than 2 years, or both at the discretion of the court. And for any subsequent violation, a fine of not less than 100,000 pesos but not exceeding 200,000 pesos, or imprisonment of not less than 2 years but not more than 6 years, or both at the discretion of the court. Any person who abuses the privileges granted herein shall be punished with imprisonment of not less than 6 months or a fine not less than 5,000 pesos but not more than 50,000 pesos, or both at the discretion of the court. If the violator is a corporation, organization, or any similar entity, the officials thereof directly involved shall be liable therefor. And lastly, if the violator is an alien or a foreigner, he shall be deported immediately after service of sentence without further deportation proceedings. So, in obligations with the penal clause, the penalty shall substitute the indemnity for damages and the payment of interest in case of non-compliance. If there is no stipulation to the contrary, nevertheless, damages shall be paid if the obligor refuses to pay the penalty or is guilty of fraud in the fulfillment of the obligation. And the penalty may be enforced only when it is demandable in accordance with the provisions of this code. And that would be all. Thank you.